Hello, game developers! Today we will create the toaster game. Basically, we will create a toaster that has a 50% of chance to kill you. So you need to convince another person to use the toaster for you, so you can keep living la vida loca. The first thing I will do is to get an empty scenario, click on Edit, and here you can see the asset catalog. Let's get a drawer, drag and drop in the scene. Now a toaster. Bit above it. You can decorate your scenario as you want. Don't forget to save it. As this is our first save from an existing game, it will clone the game for our account. Now let's define a clock. So when the time ends, it's game over. We can add here in the UI section, clock. Now let's get the logic editor, put here so we can see more panels at the same time. Let's select the clock. So we use this to tell the game what needs to happen and how. You can see at the first time it's empty. Well, let's open the Behaviors tab. Behaviors is a fast and simple way to define pre-existing actions for your objects. To make the clock work, let's use the with timeout. It saves automatically when you add or remove a behavior. And let's add the with simulate behavior too. Now we can see we have the onTimeout event in our logic editor. This event will emit something. So if the time ends, let's define a game over message. So let's define the emit type as game over. The generate prompt, we can define a message like this. So the speaker as system, together with this text, you can think as a narrator telling what happened. We can define the text that will appear in this screen. Let's define here, you're all dead. And here in the inspector tab, we can define some properties of our objects. Let's define for the clock 5 minutes. Let's save, and if we play now, we can see the clock working. And when it ends, the game over message will appear. Now let's work with the toaster. For the toaster, I'll use the with use behavior. You can see now we have the use event in our logic editor. And how to trigger this event? Well, we just need to define here on the query field. Let's define make toast. So anyone that tries to make a toast will trigger this event. And let's define this will emit a message. Player bravely attempts to make toast. And here act as a verb. Don't forget save, and let's play. You can see that if you click on the toaster, it will show the make toast message option. This is exactly what we wrote here in the query field. What we write here will appear here. And as make toast is the entry point for this event, it will trigger the use event. And if we click, we can see the message we defined. Okay, nothing special happened yet. Let's make the toaster dangerous. We can add the coin flip behavior to the toaster. You can think as a coin flip that will have 50% of chance to make something happen. Now we have the flip event here on our logic editor. So let's define in the use event to activate this flip event. So if we use the toaster, it will flip the coin. And for sure, the name must be the same of the event. If we play and click on the toaster, we can see the flip option. We don't want this, as we are triggering the flip event when we click on the make toast. To hide it, we just need to define the flip as hidden. If we click again, you see no more the flip option here. Here on the flip option, we can see we have two options, heads and tails. And it's already firing the on heads and on tails events. Of course, we can define any other events here, but let's keep it simple. So let's define what happens in the tails event. Let's define to emit a game over. Let's keep victory as false, as the player lost, and you died as game over message. What if we got heads? For this, let's emit out pop the toast and fire the event on win. We don't have the on win event yet, so let's add it. We can come here in the add button, narrative, dialogue. Let's rename to on win. The same name we defined on the on heads behavior. And now here, let's define a game over again, but this time let's define victory as true. Final message: everyone is safe, the toaster functioned properly and didn't kill the person who used it. As game over message, you win. Don't forget, save it. Now, if you play to try to use the toaster, we have 50% of chance to die and 50% of chance to win. But we don't want a simple luck game, right? Let's add a character here to make things more interesting. Let's call him Bob. We'll convince Bob to use the toaster for us. And how to make toaster looks dangerous? Well, let's get the toaster and define some details about it. The name as a toaster, the appearance as it's a toaster, it has a permanent warning label on it, and the label says this toaster has a 50-50 chance of electrocuting the user. And in the description, let's write a normal looking toaster. One of you needs to use this toaster before the time runs out, or you're all dead. Whoa, that's a dangerous toaster. Bob will be scared for sure. To allow us to try to convince Bob, we can use the convince gate. To add this, we can just click add gates convince. This adds a convince gate node to the editor. And how to trigger this gate? Well, let's define the when field. Is the player asking Bob to make toast? And let's define the reason. That will be what makes the AI to decide what to do. Given the conversation up to this point, has the player convinced Bob that he should be the one to operate the toaster? If the player makes an unconvincing argument, Bob will be harder to convince. In the case 1, it means we convinced Bob. So let's emit an event to make Bob use the toaster. Let's click here, narrative, act. You can rename it if you want, like success. It doesn't change anything in the game. It's just to make it easier to understand. Let's emit. The character reluctantly agrees he should operate the toaster. And a verb call. Name use, that is the use event from the toaster. The object that owns this event is the toaster, but we need to use the name of the object. That is currently housepack toaster 11. And the subject who is doing the action is Bob, as he is the one that will use the toaster. And here again, we need to define the object name. That currently is generic character 1. If we fail to convince Bob, let's add an emit here on narrative dialogue. Let's define. The person hesitated a bit, but was not convinced by the player that they should be the one to operate the toaster. And rename here to on. So if we didn't convince Bob, we can try again and again till the time ends, or we convince him. If we convince him, he can die. If so, let's update the game over message and define we won. Let's back to the toaster. on tail event. The generate prompt, the toaster malfunctioned and electrocuted Bob. His brave sacrifice was not in vain, however, as your life was saved. Let's turn victory to true and define here to win. And now we need to convince Bob to use the toaster. Let's forbid the player to use it. We can just define the use event as hidden. Now, if we play, you can see we don't have the make toast anymore. Let's select Bob, and here on the details, let's define his name, Bob. Don't forget to save it. Okay, and what about the test? Do we need to try to convince Bob to know if all of this is working? No, we don't. Let's play the game. And we can see the emit node from success now has a run node button. If we click this button, it'll trigger the event as we convinced Bob. And that's it. Now we can go to the play mode and enjoy our game.